everybody. This is episode 5 of Injustice for All. And today we're going to talk about the FBI agency, Kash Patel confirmation, maybe sprinkle a little bit of the Tulsi Gabbard confirmation as well. And yeah, so let's get into it. How are you?
I'll manage. It's warmed up a little bit, still cold, but warmer.
So I spoke to you earlier and you said you do not watch confirmations. But this is just a hearing.
They're not even really hearings. Some time ago, they actually asked questions and sought to learn something. These days, what you have is one side using the opportunity to make a speech denouncing the other side. So they don't say, what is your position on so and so? They say, you have a thing against so and so, and you know that that's not right. And because you're supporting Donald Trump, we know that you're trying to get away with so and so. So that's not questioning. That's just speech making opportunities. And it's boring and it's predictable these days. So once the committee gets through with the thing, they have their majority opinion, which goes out to the floor of the chamber, and the chamber can, by acclamation, by specific roll call, by vote on whether to accept the committee recommendation or have separate hearings in front of the whole body. So most of the time, it's just an exercise in alternating between getting mad or feeling good, depending upon which side is up yakking at that time. And then it all goes in the congressional record, and they get several days to correct the congressional record. So it reflects what they want to be published, even if it has nothing to do with what they actually said when they were up with the mic. So anyway.
Well, I want to just play a couple of clips of Kash Patel confirmation.
Your boss has said that General Milley, who served us with great distinction, I happen to have great admiration for, should be tried for treason. Do you agree with that?
Senator, everybody's entitled to their opinion. The only thing that matters at the FBI is whether the law is followed.
Okay, I know everybody's entitled to their opinion. Your boss has said that General Milley, who served us with great distinction, I happen to have great admiration for, should be tried for treason. Do you agree with that?
Senator, everybody's entitled to their opinion. The only thing that matters at the FBI is whether the law is followed.
Okay.
See what he did? And who served with great distinction. That's his opinion. See, and he's not asking him a question. He's making a statement of a presumed fact that the respondent may not agree with. And he told him, that's my boss's opinion. He's got freedom of speech. But what it counts is whether the agency I am up to head will follow the law.
I want to talk to you about the Epstein case. I have worked on this for years, trying to get those records of who flew on Epstein's plane and who helped him build this international human trafficking, sex trafficking ring. Now, earlier, I urged then Chairman Durbin to subpoena those records, and I ended up being blocked by Senator Durbin and Christopher Wray. They stonewalled on this, and I know that breaking up these trafficking rings is important to President Trump. So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past.
Okay, this was from a friendly political party member. So what happened is as a statement, and essentially his role is to agree with it. Okay, it's again, it may or may not be true. Epstein never got brought to trial. If a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, he's dead, so you can't go there. And he made a statement of fact, presumed to be true. which many people accept that as true. And he gave a statement that he agreed to help the purposes out. Let's see what he says.
What were you doing on that day?
On that day specifically, responding to preparing to mobilize and deploy the National Guard once we got the lawful request from the local governing authority, which was the mayor of D.C. and the Speaker of the House.
Now, how many days in advance were you working to prepare the Department of Defense to help secure the Capitol on January 6th?
Days in advance, Senator, we were in the Oval Office on an unrelated national security matter with the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself. And the President authorized up to 20,000 plus National Guardsmen and women to secure any security measures necessary related to the Capitol. So we were moving to the fullest extent of the law before the requisite request came from a local governing authority days ahead of time.
And while you were Chief of Staff at DOD, how many times did DOD approach Capitol Police and ask if they needed National Guard assistance?
I believe those letters are well documented, numerous instances, and numerous of those instances, those requests were shut down.
Now, am I correct that the Capitol Sergeant at Arms said assistance was unnecessary?
That's correct, Senator.
Who did the Sergeant at Arms report to?
The Speaker of the House.
That would have been Nancy Pelosi at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And would that also be Chuck Schumer, then the Senate Majority Leader?
The Sergeant at Arms, yes, Senator, reports up there.
Did Mayor Bowser, the Democrat elected mayor in D.C., either request or allow National Guard assistance?
She put in writing on the days leading up to January 6th a declination for National Guard additional support. And that letter is available publicly to the world.
So, and just to speak English for folks at home, a declination meant she said no, don't send National Guard. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a simple question, because from the questioning from my Democrat colleagues, they might think otherwise. Do you condemn violence against law enforcement?
All of it.
So they were also asking him whether Nancy Pelosi refused National Guard assistance on January 6th.
See, what happened is you had an artful way of direct examination to present a case to a commission or an agency by a lawyer talking to somebody that's a lawyer already trained in the law. So that's what you just heard. You didn't hear a speech. You asked the way they used to do it, where they'd ask questions. He's been around long enough to know how it's done, and the rest of them are just making hack speeches and getting nowhere, because essentially you could just say, no, I don't know. I don't have insufficient information. So all you have is a crunch speech in there that sounds ridiculous. So this is how you're supposed to do it. So he knows it. The senator is well aware of how these things work. And they're building up a case. And you see, I said this years ago, I said, there's another side to January 6th. And when you get into it, it's not this narrative that was built up on these clown show tactics of making speeches and assuming that the speech you make with an accusation to a witness becomes, in fact, the fact, because it's not the testimony of the witness. You're just giving a statement to him and presuming that it's true. So now we get the story on the record, and you can see what the FBI might be looking into. And you can also see why perhaps Biden extended a pardon to these people on the January 6th Congressional Committee, because under the Constitution, why do you need it? They've got absolute immunity anyway. So what was it that he pardoned? The only thing that suggests itself in the face of that absolute immunity by constitutional edict is that they were conspiring, which is a felony. And you can conspire to do something that is otherwise legal and do it in a legal fashion, but because you are conspiring, in other words, making an agreement to accomplish something illegal, that becomes a crime. So they may be needing to pardon or may have needed to pardon to protect from that.
Did you say that the FBI headquarters should be shut down and reopened as a museum of the deep state?
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to go an extra time?
Let's see, you get a second round. Before I call on Senator
Could he
Lee,
just answer the question if he said that the FBI headquarters, where they investigate cybercrime and terrorism,
Mr.
should
Chair.
be shut down and opened as a deep state?
Hey, Mr. Chair.
As a museum? Did he say that the headquarters should be shut down?
Mr. Chair.
I deserve an answer to that
It's-
question.
I
He
guess
is
it's-
asking to be head of the FBI, and he said that their headquarters should be shut down.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry.
you got anything you want to say, Mr. Patel, before I go on to Senator Lee?
Simply this. If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Mr.
Chair.
Chairman, I am quoting his own words
Along-
from September of 2024.
Along-
It is his own words. It is not some conspiracy. It is what Mr. Patel actually said himself. Facts matter.
You forget that you had 3 minutes in the next round to say what you just said.
Okay, I'll say him again.
Okay, before I call Lee.
Mr. Chair, just parliamentary inquiry, and it was on time. It wasn't disputing any of the debate.
This is just ludicrous. This is stupid. And what ought to be happening is a press conference by this woman here so she can make her accusations, because she put the question in a form that in a court or in a hearing, a formal hearing before a commission or a committee, would not be allowed. That is inappropriate.
Debate, but
You have
I
people in Congress, Senate, and the House who are ignorant of how things work in America when it comes to establishing something and bringing out evidence.
intend to keep to my 7 minutes, and I appreciate you keeping everyone to it. If we go over, can we have that decrement against the time in the second round? If a member goes over,
I'm not
that was actually 10 minutes, Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure that I want to, sometimes it's faster to get things done here, just letting people shout and than it does to shut them up.
Mr.
But
Chairman.
You're a wise man, Mr.
before
Chair.
we-
Thank you.
before we
Mr.
go
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Before we go to Lee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, what do you want?
I love this guy. Mr. Chairman, I'm unlike Senator Tillis. I mean, if we're going to start this, I want an extra 3 minutes.
Well,
Now, my friend Senator
I'm
Klobuchar
not-
went 3 minutes over.
So here, what you're saying is the chairman wasn't a very good chairman by not shutting her up. But I've gone through this before, and I think I know how to handle it and get
I
this
think
done.
I think you're a star-spangled awesome chairman. I just want to say that for the record. But if you're going to let somebody over there go 3 minutes over, I want my extra 3 minutes.
Well, let's see if it's abused by anybody else before we make that decision.
I'm just telling you, I'm going to abuse it.
So, did you catch the last part of this clip?
Yeah, I did, up to the point that it's frozen on the screen there. This is the kind of clown show that you've got. You have too many people who have never conducted a meeting or been involved in formally conducted meeting who are in Congress today, and they don't know how. They want to get on and they want to get emotional and go into histrionics because that's how they think things are supposed to have been done. They have no clue until they've been there several terms what parliamentary procedure is about. They don't know what Robert's Rules of Order is trying to accomplish, and have never heard of it probably. So it tends to get this kind of disruption where like they're arguing over 3 minutes here and there, and the woman who was running off at her big mouth who wanted with the answer, and she was going through all the hysterics after making a speech. She went 3 minutes over time. So
But he, and you know what? He was cool, calm, and collective throughout the whole confirmation, and everybody else was rattled.
yeah, see, the Republicans, Cruz was asking intelligent questions to make a point. And he's building a real case that X, Instagram, I don't think Facebook, but TikTok is going to get about. We're here talking about business. Somebody's trying to clean this mess up. We love it that he's been doing this. And here's one of these clown show types trying to put this circus on and make wild accusations. And like, when are you going to tell us? When are you going to tell us about? When are you going to admit that you once beat your wife? And when are you going to tell us you're not going to do it anymore? Like, none of that happened. I want an answer to my question. You didn't ask a question. You made a statement, and it's foolish.
I'm gonna play this clip.
And see, you know what's interesting? Because the Republican Party holds the majority in both chambers, what's going on is they know that the vote is going to be on a partisan basis. He can afford to badmouth the opposition, and so can all of the rest of Trump's nominees, and basically tell them to go to hell, you're full of it. Now, next one.
So do you think that America is safer because the 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities. I also believe America is not safer because President Biden's commutation of a man who murdered 2 FBI agents, Agent Kohler's and Williams' family, deserve better than to have the man that point blank range fired a shotgun into their heads and murdered them released from prison. So it goes both ways.
Leonard Pelletier was in prison for 45 years. He's 80 years old, and he was sentenced to home confinement. So he's not free, as you might have just suggested.
He killed 2 FBI agents.
That's true, he did, and he went to prison for it and should have. My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we don't have 50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question.
I'm
going to say,
here.
I don't think we're safer. Matthew Huddle was sent back to Indiana.
Okay, question is, you released the 1,600 not to promote public safety, but to maintain due process of law and to keep the country respectable and to deal with administration of justice. That's why you pardoned the 1,600, not to make the country safer. So the question has no bearing to what happened, bearing on what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Non sequitur. It's not eliciting something material to the issue. They were not pardoned to make the country safer. That's not what pardons are about. Pardons are to rectify a wrong.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they were confined for political purposes, which is contrary to the Bill of Rights, and it violates due process of law, and the contemporary term is lawfare. Duh.
Well,
nothing further to say beyond that, sir. So your question is not well posed. You might want to think about it again and repose it in a more appropriate form that can elicit some realistic answer, because we don't know. Safety was not the issue that was being determined. It was fundamental fair play and justice in compliance with the Constitution and the spirit thereof. That's what we were there for.
I kind of want to touch a little bit on Tulsi Gabbard confirmation, because Kash Patel confirmation is done. And I think
slam dunk beat ass. That's
what. Yeah. And I appreciate his demeanor, his answers, and I look forward to him being, sworn in as the new head of the FBI. I think it'd be a breath of fresh air.
First thing, they need to chisel that garbage off at the top of the building when you come up on it, dedicating it to that fiend who ought to have done some penitentiary time, J. Edgar Hoover, that buck dancing Negro who was passing for white.
Oh, yeah. Um,
And close it down and turn it into a museum because it's a place that is haunted by tremendous loads and bad karma from corruption.
well, we're going to get into that in a second. So Tulsi Gabbard, her confirmation. How do you feel about her confirmation, or just her being nominated? I believe for National Intelligence Agency.
Why not?
I'm not going to play the whole 10 minutes, but this is just the opening statement. I'll play like the first 2 or 3 of her.
One quick point. They set up U.S. Intelligence Agency, OSS, Office of Strategic Services, which was abolished and then replaced with the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, whose mandate was to acquire information and analyze it and give a concise form of it for the president's briefing so he could exercise his function as commander in chief and chief diplomat. The problem is that they needed somebody conversant with Europe who could speak foreign languages. So the intelligence services tended to be dominated with little, well, I guess not little, but aristocratic, well-off young people, young men who traveled in Europe and could speak the foreign languages and who had seen the capitals because they had vacationed or traveled there. But they weren't streetwise and they couldn't make it on an American street, let alone on a foreign street when it came down to the crunch of gathering intelligence. So they started buying it, and then that didn't work out. And then they started saying, why do we have to buy it when we can be the ones that make it that makes it happen? So everybody will have to react to us. So what you got was the boule, ultra rich, ultra connected, who were running I Spy for the United States. And it kind of has put a weird gloss on everything because when you look at American intelligence, the ghost that hangs over it is sitting there smoking a big cigar in his club, and he's drinking a scotch, 70-year-old scotch, and maybe nibbling on something that is just about as old, and he doesn't quite know what it is, and he's got people running here and there to wait on him. In other words, you have the old money that is running the intelligence thing. So that's kind of crazy because that's not what you need, and that's why we have all of these contractors and why they get so many people that have been through the military now and special operations and people that they have recruited out of college and brought into the context of running intelligence. Now, I had occasion, it's been about 10, 12 years since last it occurred. The CIA was coming to visit somebody that was working as one of my executive producers that I was well acquainted with, my brother, the former Cliff Stewart. And this CIA operative, credential carrying, was somebody I went to UCLA with. I knew him. He was not one of those people who made it happen. He was boule for a Negro. He wouldn't have anything to do with black folk. And he wasn't exactly what I would call a badass. So he's in there with my friend, and my friend is giving him notes on stuff like silent killing with a knife and some other stuff. And he's trying to go back and ask him about gunplay. And I'm looking at somebody that, like, really? That's how they teach you folk to shoot? Oh my goodness. Man, you guys can't get your John Wick on, and you're supposed to be the big, real life, whatever, and remember the equalizer that we like to look at and all of the rest of the stuff, and this is what you putting up? Oh man, come on. Who does that?
So, real quick, I'm gonna play first 2 minutes of her opening statement. It's 10 minutes, but I'm not gonna play the whole 10 minutes.
Military, by the way, so at least she has that going for her.
The what?
She's been in the military, so she has that going for her.
To President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation. If confirmed as DNI, I will do my very best to fulfill this mandate and bring leadership to the intelligence community with a laser-like focus on our essential mission, ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people.
That was 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Good speech. Only thing I disagree with it is there weren't tens of thousands of American military deaths as a result of this mess. The total over there from 2001 up until recently was between 5,300. To give you a perspective, that many died in the first 48 hours at the Battle of Shiloh in 1862 here in Tennessee during the American Civil War. That was just one battle. So the other problem is that when you actually analyze what our intelligence community is doing or has done, it's one of the few things that Hollywood gets right when they portray it, and they have some arrogant somebody in there that doesn't want to apply common sense because it might be disruptive of the party line. And they don't listen to folk who have done an interesting analysis. That part, from what I've seen and the people involved in the American intelligence community that I've encountered personally and talked to, that part of Hollywood is quite real. You might want to watch this series, Jack Ryan, and notice how he has to interact with some of his superiors in the intelligence community.
Can I interject something? It's another show that I would like for you to watch if you haven't. And it's called The Agency, and it's about the CIA, but their UK station. So that's another good one. I do want to encourage people to watch too. But I want to swing it to
one little remark here. Like I was referring to this person I went to UCLA with that is an actual CIA operative. He never impressed me when we were at UCLA together for several years as anybody that would be particularly adept at ferreting out information, because he didn't strike me as having common sense. He wasn't particularly analytical, and I didn't think he was the smartest or brightest bulb on the shelf. And when I talked to him decades later, my opinion didn't improve. And I'm saying, how would this person be somebody that you would depend on to gather intelligence for the United States? This is an analyst who would go through columns of figures, except he did not have a background in statistical analysis. So what exactly does he do? Well, he was a good Negro. And does that qualify you for being now a senior CIA operative? No, it doesn't. But one good last little remark on her. For somebody who has been targeted by these agencies and wronged, that's the type of person you need to put in charge so they can clean them up. They need to be brought into the 21st century because they have let too many bad things go. And I am right now rather perturbed that they have had so little to say about the impact of this wide open border we have had and what that means in terms of our enemies in the Middle East and in China and elsewhere in the world, and these fanatics we have been dealing with since we got involved based on falsehood and incompetence under the Bush administration, talking about weapons of mass destruction, and why they haven't brought out the obvious common sense answer to a lot of it. The president is a scion of a family that founded an energy company, Halliburton, and Halliburton was trying to get the bid to control the Iraqi oil industry. And after 2007, and this big lie about weapons of mass destruction, got control of it without a bid. And as of 2009, and the money is increased, they were making $2.7 million net every 7 hours of the day. Now, why doesn't somebody talk about that in terms of we not only need to deal with foreign intelligence, we need to deal with the impact of some of our policy on putting ourselves in a mess?
So I want to go to legacy of corruption.
That's kind of what I was talking about. And incompetence.
Go ahead.
Well, I made the statement. It's a legacy of incompetence and corruption Nobody exposed the Bush administration, Bush 2 administration, in its perfidy and pulling this fraud off that did cost several 100,000 foreign lives and at least 5,002 to 5,400 American lives, and many, many more who were maimed for life, grotesquely maimed in a fashion that would have produced their deaths 50 years ago, but now survive. Nobody said anything about that. See, we had the failure of intelligence that led to 9/11. That was 24 years ago this year.
So,
And what about the failure of what's happening with the southern border? Not on the popular stuff about criminals that are coming across, but what about foreign enemies who can just walk across the border, get transported courtesy of our government any damn where they want to go, spy, sabotage, undermine, undercut, lying ready in wait to do what they have instructions, orders, or a commitment to do. Breakdown. That's not supposed to be the bailiwick of the CIA and the NSA because it's domestic. It's supposed to be the FBI, but the FBI is a hot nest of incompetence, corruption, and long-term dedication to the wrong kind of things and being very, very political.
so I want to interject this. You ever saw that movie, The Spook That Sat by the Door?
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
When it first came out, 25 years ago, got a copy of it. My brother that was being consulted by the CIA, the late, great Dr. Clifford Stewart of Los Angeles, the maestro of martial arts.
So
we got a copy and we went through and took notes, and I read the book too when it first came out.
do you think Kash Patel is somewhat the spook that sat by the door?
No, I don't.
So break down the spook that sat by the door and then correlate it with Kash Patel.
The spook who sat by the door was a good Negro, so he could get hired by the CIA. He learned the art and craft of spying, espionage, sabotage, and assassination. So what he did is he used the opportunity to spy on what was termed at the time the white power structure. So when he got a different kind of assignment, he took it upon himself to organize the young thugs in the hood, and he set up a killing machine, and they practiced assassinations, and they scheduled a day where they were going to start the revolution that was going to reset things in America. So they pulled at the very end of the movie, they started the war. And the spook who sat by the door was the spy who sat by the door, listening in to what was going on the other side of the door to put it to use.
Right. But that was a good thing.
Yeah, well, the premise was unreal. There was not going to be any revolution started somewhere in the late 1960s, as per the book and movie. That wasn't going to happen because the Negroes weren't into that, and a few black folk by that time had been infiltrated in their organizations and were saying, hey, how are we going to do this if you can't trust anybody? And maybe what we need to do is the same thing that others have learned. Sometimes when you have a system like ours, there's no real need to have a revolution. You can work within and have evolution and get the same thing.
But don't you think that description, when you just laid out the spook that sat by the door, is somehow correlated with Kash Patel heading the FBI, because he was on the inside for a very long time. And before that, he was a defense attorney for a good portion of the time as well. So he sat by multiple doors.
That isn't sitting by the door. He was a defense lawyer. He's somebody that's been impacted. He is a reformer. He is a hatchet man for the administration to chop this mess up and start all over again. That's how Clarence Thomas got where he was. They brought him in as a hatchet man to destroy affirmative action while he was at Yale, to stay in Yale. And they sent him all around the country to speak against it in the 1970s. And then when the Reagan administration got in 1980, he wasn't long out of law school. And they brought him in to destroy EEOC. Then they made him an appellate judge on the Second Circuit, and then they put him in the U.S. Supreme Court. He's done some good stuff since with the Second Amendment and First Amendment, but he never practiced law, never had a case in court. And the first time he showed up in court, he was the appellate judge on the Second Circuit, where they got hit scratching. I don't know what a woman is, Tanya.
Tatanji Jackson.
Tatanji, yeah.
Okay, I get it. So there's really no type of correlation with Kash Patel and the spook that sat by the door. However, I do think that, he will bring in a new initiative or a new pathway to the FBI, right? Not saying
that's good. He will do that. I'm sure he'll do that. What he does remind me to an extent of is myself. When I got asked to run for criminal court judge, and I got elected 35 some years ago, or longer than that, maybe. I came in knowledgeable of the process. I didn't have to learn what a criminal court judge had to do like so many do. I had taken upon myself over decades to find out. I hit the ground running, and my idea was to reform the thing and do something with it that needed to be done, because it was not being put to the use that it could have been put to deal with correcting the crime problem, which was based on some other problems. I think he's going to do that. And one of the problems is we've had too many people who have been put in his position who either were ignorant of what they were dealing with or simply wanted to be the one in charge of the same old, same old.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the FBI, Donald Trump said he will release the FBI documents of JFK Jr. assassination, RFK. Is it JFK Jr. or just JFK?
John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy and R. F. Kennedy, their assassinations, and MLK Jr. assassinations. So that will be the president is going to release the original unredacted FBI facts.
Most of them.
Huh?
But I've seen a lot of those. They're not something that is not assembled. It's in a repository in Bethesda, Maryland right now. It used to be in downtown DC on 14th Street. I had been in the place, and that was because in the late 1980s, Congress passed a law authorizing a repository for these records. President George Herbert Walker Bush, Bush 1, followed by President William Clinton, both issued executive orders directing that all federal agencies send all memoranda, documents, letters, analysis, research, investigative materials that they had on any of these assassinations or the attempt, from George Wallace to Ronald Reagan to Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you name it, and they were to be put in this repository. And up until about 20 years ago, you could put in a request, pay your fee, and get a certified copy of a specific document or type of document or category of document that they would copy for you at this repository. Then it just closed up for lack of funds. Under the Bush administration, And all of that stuff is now out there in Bethesda, Maryland. And I imagine what Trump's talking about is simply releasing it for mass publication instead of simply being available for public request under the FOI, Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. So that's what he's talking about. A lot of that's pretty interesting. It has some things to shit on the John F. Kennedy assassination. It has something to do with exchanges, and you'd have to dig deep, because unless you dig deep, you wouldn't. One of the things I would suggest that anybody that gets hands on the material look particularly at a letter exchange between investigator Stephen Trott, formerly of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office and latterly a federal district court judge. Look to some letters between him and the attorneys for Billy Saul Estes, who was doing federal time as a racketeer involved with the Texas oil industry. And in particular, what he was off. In other words, what you have is an assemblage of a whole lot of information that people need to be able to analyze. That's why I focused on this exchange between Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Trott and Saul Estes' attorneys. The Dallas Police Department, in spite of all that's been published on this, the original detectives had a lot of questions, and they didn't buy into what the FBI was talking about. They didn't buy into the fact that too many people that were on the Warren Commission to investigate this were compromised and implicated to an extent in it. And they noted that on the buttstock of the Carcano rifle, there were prints that were quite identifiable, but they didn't have a known suspect to compare them with. So based on the letter exchanges between Billy Saul Estes' attorneys and Assistant U.S. Attorney Trott, they got a name. And when they ran that name, they got a bingo. That person's fingerprints are on the buttstock of the rifle. They had him down on a long history of things, and they wound up supposedly exhuming a body because this individual was purportedly killed in a one-car wreck, broad daylight in the middle of the Texas desert with no witnesses. But when they did the exhumation, they found that the coffin had no body in it. And that led them to some other things, and they had a revision of what they thought went on. Now, that would take some doing. And the problem is that Trott, in one of the letters, says that he was going to submit the reports from Saul Estes' attorneys to the FBI to investigate it. Well, the Dallas detectives also got copies of some of the FBI internal memoranda in reaction to the Trott letter, and they were basically told to brush off Trott and clean this up because they were implicated in the mess. Not necessarily that they had done it, but that they might have been covering, and their investigation was not good. So based on the memoranda that these detectives now had in their hands that are certified as having been internal FBI documents, based on the report from the FBI, copies of which certified are now in their hands, and based on the letter series that Trott sent back to the Saul Estes attorneys, we see that there was something indeed to the story, but everybody was thrown off because of the wrongdoing of the FBI and saying there wasn't anything to it. So these kind of things will provide clues, and those are the kind of insights and the kinds of information that should be brought to light, but you have to know what to do with them. Like the grassy knoll, without equivocation, it's impossible for the shot to come from the grassy knoll. Why? There are people standing along the curb, and when you actually looked at the very limo with mannequins in, where Kennedy and the governor and his wife, his wife and the president's wife were sitting head high. Kennedy would be about chest high on most of the people standing along the parade route. So you would have had to have been able to flip a coin and get lucky and not have anybody standing between your line of sight and the curbside. So we looked at it while people were standing there as the real limo kept driving by on a circus. And, oh, nobody can do this, no way. But somebody could get away through this grassy knoll because there is a grate that you could drop a rifle down through if you were coming from the railroad tracks. And if somebody got the rifle, there is 400 meters worth of distance through this tunnel you could stand up in wide open, and you come out in an overgrown, weed-filled field on the other side of a rail yard. The other point, too, is all of the deputies who had been there attested to this. Anybody could have moved freely with a long gun because you had all of these law enforcement officers who were in plain clothes, the Texas Rangers, the Dallas Police, the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, you had Secret Service folk. All of them just came out, and there were several hundred armed officers with long rifles, and they weren't in uniform, so nobody was asking for ID. And they remarked on that. Also, one of the officers gave me a statement. He said he was the first cop on the scene in the book repository. He was walking up the stairs from the basement to the first floor to go to the other side of the building so they could get the stairs to bring the elevator down. They passed Lee Harvey Oswald. This detective said he stopped him. The building superintendent says, "Oh, this is Oswald. He works here." And at that time, while he's talking to Oswald, the elevator goes past him down to the basement. But you can't summon this elevator. You have to go get it because it's 100 some years old at the time. So there was some interesting stuff in there. But that kind of thing come out, but you still have to know what to do with it.
All right. I think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to episode 5 of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown.
And I like the way the hearing
And
these clowns got put in their place for trying to put on a clown show rather than interrogating the person. They didn't show anything. They just made statements, and this is in their minds anyway when it comes to whether they're going to support the man or not. So they didn't find out anything that's going to persuade anybody to change their minds, because everybody on one side's already heard that nonsense, and everybody on the nonsense side knows what the nonsense is, so nothing new got developed. Cruz did ask some questions, at least inform he was doing the right thing.
all right. And with that, see you guys in the next video. Good night.
Ciao.